All right, now we're off. Okay, beautiful.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, I want to welcome everyone to the high school town hall as we try and go through some of the elements of the opening of school and primarily going through the block schedule. I know this is a significant shift to do during the summertime, going from a 9-period schedule into a block. And then on top of that, we load in the fact that we're going to be doing a hybrid rotational model. So Ms. Orr thought it was a good idea that we take some time and go over some of the elements of that. I did share out a video a couple of weeks back on how the block works, which I'll go over again towards the end of the presentation. But I'm going to do my best to get through some information that I hope will be helpful in terms of the opening of school. There will be more information to come. We are working every single day to work through all of the varying factors and logistics of this giant process of trying to get everyone back into school and keep everyone safe. So tonight, if you have questions, I'm going to do my best to answer them on the fly. The best way to share a question, since we're in stream mode, is to use the Google form that we have supplied below. You can either use your phone and scan the QR code there, or I tried to make it as easy as possible to be able to type in the URL if you're just sitting at your computer. So I'm just going to leave that up for a couple of minutes, and probably I should take that back, probably about a minute. And after that, we will get underway. So that's the location. And once we hit 6:03, I'm going to get going so we can get through this, because there's a lot to share. It's funny, a minute is a really long time when you're sitting on a Google Meet and waiting. So I'm assuming by this point, everyone has it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to our Google Meet on reopening. I want to start with some odds and ends on that, just to run through some information. Most of this has either been shared out in the last week or two, or will be shared out, going into next week, depending on the timing of particular events. But we wanted to review a couple of things just so you were aware. We are doing a freshman orientation at the usual day and time in August that we do freshman orientation. However, we are going to do a fully virtual freshman orientation. It will be hosted by Mr. Liss and myself. Mr. Liss is serving as the 9th grade assistant principal this year, and it'll be a streaming event, not unlike this one, where your students will have a chance to hear from some of the people that they're going to be interacting with at the high school next year. It's not the same as coming together for a regular freshman orientation when we're in the same building, primarily because Mrs. Jewell in the cafeteria usually has all sorts of awesome treats, which I haven't found a way to replicate virtually, and trust me, I've tried. So for freshman parents, I will be sending out the live stream link next week, so please keep an eye out in terms of email for that. We are going to try, as I know that there's general anxiety when students transfer into a new building, especially if they haven't had older siblings and haven't spent much time in that building before. Obviously having lots of people walk through the building is something that's very difficult to do in terms of the really just the current state of all things, but particularly in a high school, especially as we're trying to get everything ready. So we're working to do a modified freshman walkthrough. Usually we do a self-guided walkabout the Friday morning after orientation. This year, we're going to be doing it on the evening of September 20th. Again, information will be coming out next week, just so you can plan for it. As you can see, we're going to divide by letters. So letters A through L will be from 6 to 7. Letters M through Z will be 7 to 8. And we're going to ask people to comply with the rules I've listed down below in order to allow us to have a safe event, so people have an opportunity, students in particular, to walk around and see where their classes are and deal with. They'll actually be the first ones to try out our unidirectional hallways, which I'll talk about a little later. And we'll actually have a leg up on some of our upperclassmen who are used to going whichever way they want to in the hallways historically here. I also wanted to just share out, student handbooks have undergone obviously a very, very significant revision to try and capture the scope of all the different elements of opening up with both a virtual school and a hybrid model school, and knowing that that may not last for the entire year. So if we were to ever go back into the regular operation of school, it's really almost trying to put together 3 handbooks at once. And Mrs. Stellato, who is running our fully virtual school, has a handbook specifically for that. So students will be getting a digital copy of that as soon as it's done, which is sometime next week. And then we ordered paper copies in production to be able to hand out, and we'll make sure students have a paper copy of that as well once they're delivered. The only thing that I wanted to point out with the fact that the handbook has been significantly overhauled to reflect all the changes is to point out one thing with the dress code and the code of conduct. We are going to follow the Department of Health guidelines, whatever they put out, to keep students safe in the building this year. All right, and that means the wearing of masks based on whatever guidance is given to us by the Department of Health. We kept that language fairly generic because right now the Department of Health says masks, but I don't know if the Department of Health is going to change its mind in 2 months and say that face shields must be worn or that eventually masks won't need to be worn. So essentially the code of conduct and the dress code essentially say students are required to follow the guidance that we put forth from the Department of Health and comply with that if they're going to attend in school. Failure to do so, or a lack of willingness to do so, can result in disciplinary consequences. I don't want to harp on that and focus on it because we're hoping everybody comes in and they're ready to come back and they're willing to do what they need to do to keep everybody as safe as possible in this current environment. So with that in mind, we are dedicated to making sure that there is follow through on Department of Health guidance, and we are going to ask all staff and all students at all times to follow that guidance. Some additional reopening odds and ends. While we are in the hybrid model, I wanted to share a few things out. I shared an extensive email yesterday covering some of this material, but just to review, or in case you haven't read it yet, we are going to extend late arrival for all grades. Normally, late arrival and early dismissal are senior-only privileges, but in an effort to help reduce the number of students in the building, particularly during first and fourth block, any student who's in good standing, we're not really particularly worried about their grades. They're doing okay there. They have good attendance. They're not behavioral problems. Any student that's in good standing, we're going to grant 9 through 12 the opportunity either to arrive late after first block or leave early before fourth block, which is about, we're talking 9:15 arrival and about 1 o'clock departure. So information was sent out yesterday with forms for approval for that. And that's one of the ways that we're hoping that we have an opportunity to have staggered arrival and staggered dismissal. We are going to have approximately 425 kids in the building for each group. Maybe a little bit less when we're done finishing, who's in virtual school and who's not. But the idea there is if we can stagger the rush in the morning and in the afternoon using that model, I think we'll reduce the difficulty we have getting kids in and out of the building, especially all at the same time at those times where they have a tendency to group together. Between the bus arrival location where Mr. Liss will be in charge of dismissing buses. So, when the bus pulls up, when we have enough clearance to empty a bus, Mr. Liss will signal to the bus driver who will let the students out. And once those students are in, he'll signal to the next bus driver to let those students in. Mr. Belknap and I are generally in the back parking lot. I'm usually by the Bulldog. He's usually by the cafeteria. So we can help make sure parents are doing drop off with kids staying 6 feet apart. That's usually not a problem for us in the morning, just based on the flow of traffic. And then Mr. Wells will be out front in the student parking lot where he can help maintain the flow of students coming in as well. Parking will be extended for all juniors and all seniors this year. Again, generally we give that to seniors first. And then if we have leftover spots, or however many leftover spots we have, we run a junior parking lottery. Last year we did it in October, and we had plans to do it right after marathon for additional spots we had left because we hold back some for our seniors. Obviously shut down, eliminated the need to do a spring lottery for juniors. But this year, while we're in hybrid, I have enough spots out front to handle essentially a class and a little bit more. if only half of our students are here on a given day, that means I can handle all juniors and all seniors. So again, as long as students are following the rules and not causing problems in the parking lot, they have good grades and all of that, they'll be welcome to come and park. BOCES and other external programs, I know that's been a question on a lot of parents' minds. As you might imagine, we have, I think, 11 different external programs that we work with. SAAC BOCES, the Southern Adirondack Education Center, it coordinates with 31 different schools, and they have to figure out their grouping as they go. I'm happy to say, in communication with all of them, we're still fine-tuning just a little bit on some of the programs, but by and large, they're willing to work with our grouping models. So, we got information from them. We used that to coordinate some of the groupings that we did at our school, and we're able to essentially have students attend programming on days they're in person with us. In some instances, programs might require those students to go every day. BOCES is not one of those as an example. So, when a student's live with us, they'll be live with BOCES. When a student's virtual with us, they'll be virtual with BOCES. So, there were a lot of moving parts. It's one of the things that slowed down getting out grouping information as we fine-tuned all of that. So I'm happy to say it looks like, working with all of the coordinators and the principals for those programs, we're going to be able to offer each and every single one of them in the model that we're using. So I'm happy about that. It is a lot of moving parts. One of the other things that we're doing to try and stop, or I guess not really try and stop, but to try and alleviate some of the concerns about students being in particular close quarters, is doing lockers by request only. I put out in my email that we don't have an pressing need to assign student lockers, because many of our students carry what they come to school with on their backs, and that works for them. We have a relatively large footprinted building, so I can appreciate the fact that it might be hard, especially in our old model, to get to your locker between every period. So a lot of students just put the materials in their backpacks and came on their way. And for some reason, our kids don't particularly care for wearing coats in the wintertime. The locker request is going to be open. So if we find that, or if you find in November we're getting into the colder season, your student changes their mind and wants a locker, you just fill out the form and we'll assign from there. That allows us, depending on the number of students we get, to be able to spread out where we're assigning lockers and reduce the likelihood that two students have a locker right next to each other and both just happen to go at the same time. The next one I know is a big one, and it might be one of the most pressing questions that is on every parent's mind and every student's mind who's tuned in today. When am I going to know what group I'm in, and when am I going to get my schedule? As you can imagine, I can't even really express how many moving parts go into putting all of this together, between making sure siblings are grouped in multiple buildings together, to honor the fact that we have parents that have very specific work schedules, and trying to work with them to support them to create a schedule that allows them to either send their kids when they're working, or be home when their kids are home, or whatever it is their own individual needs are, and to respond to the need for parents to pod together to try and avoid some of the pressure on transportation by alleviating the number of kids that need to be on a bus. There's just a lot of that. And then when we work in our virtual school options, that's scrambled teacher schedules. So we are literally day in and day out adjusting and working on that and putting things together and then pulling them all apart and trying again. So, at the end of the day, we are going to put the grouping information right onto your student's schedule. And the date we are aiming for is August 28th. So we will put schedules with grouping in the mail, but on August 28th, our goal is to turn it on School Tool. So you and your students be able to jump in and see what the schedules are. And then, when the post office catches up with us, you should have the schedules paper form in your mailbox, eventually sometime that following week.
Mr. Modi, just quickly,
yeah.
There's a question about lockers and whether they'll be getting a gym locker.
No, actually, it's a great question. No gym lockers. We're actually not going to be changing for PE for the time being. So until that changes, or until athletics is officially up and running, which actually is the next thing that we're going to be speaking about. No PE lockers at this point in time. And thank you, Ms. Covey. I've been zoning out and talking so much I wasn't paying attention to my questions. But Mr. Greep, if you're on, do you want to give a quick update on athletics? And while you're doing that, I'll scan over some questions here.
Yep, absolutely. So we received an email from the Section 2 director this afternoon that Governor Cuomo is scheduled to announce his decision on the future of interscholastic athletics within the next few days. Two time frames, either end of the week, which we're already there, or early next week. But next week we will have guidance and we will have a clear direction as to whether or not fall sports will take place this fall, or if we're going to go to the truncated schedule starting January 4th. Other than that, everything else is all speculation. The one thing that I can draw some clarity on, as I've seen a lot of questions about, is if my student is enrolled in the SGF virtual school, are they still eligible to participate in extracurriculars and athletics? The answer to that question is yes, as long as they are enrolled in at least 3 regular scheduled classes and meeting their PE requirement with an attendance rate of 80%, they would be eligible to participate if they are an SGF bona fide student. So with that, we hope to give you more information with athletics. Whatever the decision may be, we will share that with you all, and then we will also share our plan of action as we push into the future with that.
Thank you, Mr. Griep. I really appreciate it. So I'm just scanning through some questions here. Yes, I will touch on middle school scheduling tonight. The times will be a little bit different than what I show in terms of the bell schedule, but the rotation and the time blocks will be the same, although the middle school times will be just a little bit different. So, and middle school is also slated to release schedules at the same time we are. So that's the goal, is to get that information out on the 28th. Actually, and that was the question, will there be value in middle school parents continuing to listen? If you want me to go through, and that's, I think that's my last slide on opening odds and ends. I want to talk a little bit about the PSAT and a little bit about unidirectional hallways, and then I'm going to jump into scheduling. So if you're a middle school parent, if you can just bear with me for a couple of more minutes, I'll flip into that, and hopefully that provides a little bit more value for you, as I'm assuming you probably don't really care about my directional hallways and the PSAT. Prom, I know that's a question. I'm working with Mr. Van Wee on that. We're pretty close to making an announcement. You know, because we were nervous originally that even the October date might be on somewhat loose footing. We have well, that was Plan B. We have a Plan C, a Plan D, and a Plan E. So we're just waiting to hear back from the Saratoga Hilton as we work through some of that. And we don't want to leave people hanging if we're going to make a shift. So I would expect an announcement on prom one way or the other sometime next week. So Mr. Griep, there was actually a question do you want to take from me? Because this actually applies to the middle school as well. Is physical education still happening?
Yes, physical education is still going to take place. We are not going to require students change out simply because they will not have access to the locker room. With that, we will provide guidance on what attire is appropriate on the days that they're going to be in person for physical activity, because they still will be receiving content. They will still be engaged in activities. We will be adhering to DOH and CDC guidelines with our instruction and use of equipment and spacing and whatnot. But there's also going to be an online component as well mixed in with that. And it is still mandatory. It is still part of the New York State curriculum and mandatory coursework to be completed in order to receive graduation credit. So yes, there will still be PE happening.
Thank you, Mr. Griep. Okay, I just wanted to show this a little bit, and the middle school is working on a similar model, obviously a different floor map. This will be in student handbooks and something that we go over. The Department of Health guidelines recommended that we try wherever we possibly can to have one directional hallways. So that's going to be our opening model. It's one of the reasons we created a little bit of additional passing time in the block schedule. You know, there's some areas that unless I put kids outside, there's no way to get them down a hall and get them back because there's only one hallway going in that direction. And we can certainly use outside, but we know we live in upstate New York, so the number of days we can do that are somewhat limited, but you know, it's open. We're open to using that as long as we possibly can. So that's what our basic game plan is. There'll be arrows on the floors so kids can follow. So we're gonna do our best to keep kids moving in one direction, and then they just need to worry about staying 6 feet apart from the kid in front of them and the kid behind. Just Mrs. Lloyd, who's our SAT coordinator, just asked me to share this out because there's been some changes from the College Board. We are going to attempt, especially because we had to cancel the SAT in the spring, to do a school day administration for the SAT and the PSAT. That is normally done on the same time, sometime in the week after Columbus Day, but the College Board's doing that a little bit different. So the SAT school day administration will be Wednesday, September 23rd, and the PSAT, which will be for juniors only this year. We usually do it for both juniors and seniors, but we can't fit that many students in the building to test that far apart. We'll be on the original date of October 14th. Mrs. Lloyd will be sending out information to all senior and junior parents shortly. They don't need to register with the College Board. They just sign up if they're interested with Mrs. Lloyd. Both those days are on Wednesday, which is one of our remote learning days. So we should be able to actually make that work, I think, fairly well. I think we'll be able to pull that off. All right, so moving into something that I hope is applicable to parents in grades 6 through 12. I just wanted to share out what the hybrid rotation. There are two parts of this that I can understand are going to be confusing, and I'm going to do my best to explain it. I feel like I can do this in my sleep and it makes sense in my head. I just hope how I explain it makes sense to you as well. I wanted to start with what the rotation looks like, and then I can jump into the block schedule itself a little bit. Earlier this week, the district released our September calendar. Essentially, students will be cut into two groups. I'm assuming that you know already. Your students will either be in group 1 or group 2. Our school schedule now has an A day, a B day, a C day, and a D day. For most of the classes, students will see their classes on either A and C or B and D. So if you have English, you'll have English on A and C. If you have social studies on B, it'll be social studies on B and D. Phys ed, some of our music classes, and health are classes that they might only see on an A day or a B day or a D day. Science classes, they'll see 3 of the 4 as we work through that rotation. The plus of that is even if they're only seeing the class once a rotation, they're seeing it for 80 minutes, which is really a double period from last year, as we try and drive towards maintaining the regular number of instructional minutes. Excuse me. So if you look at the rotation where it says, on the 8th of September is a 6-12 group 1 A day. So that means if you have a student who on their schedule, it says they're in group 1, they will come on September 8th and they will go through all 4 of their A day classes. All right, and I'll get to group 2 in a second. I just want to explain group 1 first. All right. Group 1 will come back on Wednesday the 9th, and they'll go through their B day classes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the full rotation of their classes. On Thursday and Friday of that week, they will be home. Thursday will be an A day. Well, they'll have virtual learning, remote learning, and they'll be asked by their teacher to work on their classes when their classes were normally scheduled. So if their A day first block class starts at 7:50, at 7:50 on Thursday, they should be up and around and engage with their teacher. What that engagement will look like varies from class to class. It may be watching a pre-recorded video. It may be reading an article and answering some questions. It may be working on a project and then filling out a form that explains how fast or how far they got in that project. They'll have to do something to show their teacher that they were in attendance and getting some work done during that block. Because this fall, unlike the spring, New York State is requiring that we take attendance for all students, whether they be in person or virtual, every single day. Right? They will follow that same process on Friday the 11th with their B day classes. Right? So they'll be in person, and then virtual. If you have a group 2 student, it's the exact opposite. They'll be virtual with all their A day classes on Monday the 8th, virtual with all their B day classes on Tuesday the 8th, Wednesday the 9th, and then they'll come to school for the first time on Thursday the 10th and attend all their A day classes in person. And on Friday the 11th, they'll come and attend all their B day classes in person. Okay. It gets a little bit, I wouldn't say more complicated, but there's an additional element the following week. If you look, firstly, you'll notice that if you're a virtual school parent, if your student is 100% virtual and working with Mrs. Stellato and her staff, virtual school doesn't start until the 14th. That's when they'll get underway. I just wanted to make note of that. When we get into Monday the 14th, again, group 1 will do their C day classes. which will be mostly very similar to their A-Day classes, and then their D-Day classes. Wednesday the 16th is when this added element comes in. On Wednesday the 16th and on successive Wednesdays, anytime we have a 5-day week, right? All students will be home, so we can do a deep cleaning of the high school and have that extra time to just go through and disinfect to the best of our ability. Staff will still be here running classes. Students will follow, if you notice on this, it says remote instruction A-Day. Students will follow their A-Day schedule, all students during that time. So a teacher who has a Block 1 A-Day English class will have all of their Block 1 A-Day students virtually engaged in some activity to be determined by the teacher. All right, and then starting Thursday, then Group 2 comes in for C-Day, and then on Friday, Group 2 comes in for D-Day. And if you notice on the 21st, then we go, we're back again into that rotation. If you notice, if you look at the calendar, each Wednesday has a different letter day, and students follow that letter day. So on Wednesday the 23rd, they'll follow their C-Day schedule. On Wednesday the 30th, they'll follow their B-Day schedule, and we'll rotate through those so students have A, B, C, D in the rotation. So let's see. Okay, I think that handles all of those questions. Parents, I'm noticing some questions about the freshman orientation walkthrough. If you have questions regarding that, especially about the one adult or the one person to come with, if you have a situation that needs a separate consideration, please feel free to either email myself or email Mr. List, the assistant principal for the 9th grade, and we'll work through those with you on a case by case. So I just saw a couple of those coming up in the question section, so I just wanted to address that. All right, so getting into what the block schedule looks like for both the middle school and high school, why we're looking at making that change. Really, it's about creating less transitions during the school day, and it controls the number of contacts that students and adults have. Before they're attending 9 classes or 8 classes and a lunch. Now they're attending 4 classes and a lunch. So, that's less time in the hallway, less number of times in the hallway, and less different groups of people that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Essentially cuts it in more than in half. It gives us time in the block to do social emotional learning tasks. We're really thoughtful about the fact that students have been largely isolated since the middle of March, and that some of the work that it takes to bring them back in, they're going to be isolated again. And I know people have taken opportunities this summer to try and engage socially, but we know it's still not the same. So it gives us a chance to really dive in and build deep connections. It gives time in classrooms to really for students and teachers to create the bonds we hope are necessary to carry us through in the event that things turn and we have to go back to full virtual. One of the things that I know a lot of people are concerned about is when we went virtual in March, teachers had either up until March from September, or at least if there was a semester class from the beginning of February to the middle of March, to build those bonds and connections and relationships with students. So when students were having a hard time, there wasn't that kind of awkwardness barrier that one might need to get through to be able to ask for help or to provide support or to really have an insight in terms of what's going on with a kid, which is so important as a teacher. So we're hoping that this gives teachers additional time to build those relationships with students, especially because we're going to have smaller numbers in the classroom. And that will help in the event that we have to pivot to a full virtual model, that those relationships can be built. It allows us to increase passing time. You saw the unidirectional hallway, and it slows the pace of the day. So instead of kids having to rotate through, we had some kids that had 8 academic classes a day, and a couple of kids, just a handful that had 9. They skipped lunch to take an additional class. That is a lot of changing gears. So I'm hoping that reduction of gear changing, especially if we pivot back between the virtual model and the hybrid model, the less changing of gears that we have to do, it just makes the logistics of it easier to handle. Other benefits, like I said, students focus on 3 to 4 classes a day. If we go to remote learning, handling 3 classes remotely is a lot different than trying to handle 8 classes remotely all in the same day. It gives the ability to complete tasks in class, and if students have a hard time with a task or they need teacher help before they walk out the door, they're there because they have an opportunity to get things started. And as I mentioned, there's less assignments, it's just less churn. And sometimes that also leads to less homework because there's an opportunity to at least get started in class. How does it work? If last year students were in a class that met every other day or every day, they now meet every other day for twice as long. So your 40-minute English class that you took Monday through Friday is now every other day for 80 minutes. If you had a class that met every other day last year, now it's going to meet once every 4 days, but again, for twice as long. So the minutes should be the same. If you have a class that has a lab, for us, that's largely math and science. You'll meet 3 out of every 4 blocks, but it's important to know, like last year, if you were in science or math and you had a lab that was attached to it, that meant you did double periods. We're not doing double blocks. So you're never going to have kids that are in a science class for 160 minutes or a math class for 160 minutes. As a former English and social studies guy, just saying that out loud makes my heart flutter. But essentially, they'll meet 3 out of the 4 days, and that's where they'll make up that extra time. So, a B and D day science class, and then on an A day, that's when the lab is, something to that effect. And then, for lessons, we'll still have lessons meeting for 40 minutes. So half blocks as we work through that rotation. Again, the middle school, the time is going to be a little bit different. And I'll let Mr. Ruby and Mr. Hammond get that information out. But this just shows generally what the day-to-day block schedule looks like. You'll notice we have a homeroom built into the middle of it. The one thing that I wanted to go over, I know that the dreaded 4th period lunch at South High was something, I think the morning after my first freshman orientation, where I'd been at South High for about 8 minutes and I had a parent on me about my son has a 4th period lunch. They can't have lunch at 10 a.m. And, I can certainly sympathize with that, but we've worked it out so we can get away with 3 lunches. And I know that's also going to be a question, so I'll just address that now. How are lunches possibly going to work in a socially distant environment? We've worked it out, so we'll be using at the high school the cafeteria and the auditorium for our 2 lunch areas. Mr. Greep and Mr. Belknap and I last week ran around with tape measures and painter's tape, and we were able to figure out how to make it work to fill the number of students we need in each lunch each day and keeping them a minimum of 6 feet apart. And that was the system we figured out would work the best. So, we have systems for cleaning that will make sure that we keep those areas as disinfected as we possibly can. But I wanted to talk at least about block 3 because that's a little different than where lunches may have been before. And if I'm not mistaken, and middle school parents, please don't hold me to this ironclad. I think the middle school was still planning on assigning lunches by grade level, but within this type of model, I think, but don't necessarily hold me to that for sure, because things have been changing as we've tried to figure this out. So if you have lunch 1, if a teacher has lunch 1, students will essentially match the lunch that their teacher has. So they're attending a class with Mrs. Ryder, and Mrs. Ryder has lunch 1. So after block 2, students will report to either the cafeteria or the auditorium, and they will be assigned based on class. So Mrs. Ryder, you look at your schedule, you realize Mrs. Ryder has lunch 1 and it's auditorium. So students go, they get their food, they report to the auditorium. We're going to obviously encourage people where they can to bag lunch, just another layer of trying to keep things safe and clean to the best of your ability. But whatever works for your family is what works with your family, and we'll make it work. After 40 minutes of lunch, they would then go to Mrs. Ryder's class, and they would have 80 minutes of class. Lunch 2 is a little bit different. Lunch 2 splits a class in half. So if you have, I know Mrs. Anderson has one of these classes where students have Mrs. Anderson for her English class. They would go to from block 2 directly to Mrs. Anderson because she has lunch 2. They would attend her class for 40 minutes. They would then break and go to their assigned area, either the cafeteria or the auditorium. They would do 40 minutes of lunch, and then they would return to Mrs. Anderson for the final 40 minutes. So it gives a teacher a chance to do, half of a project or a lesson or a segment of class, and then round it together, send kids out, and then they come back and re-engage. And then the third lunch, probably, relatively self-explanatory. They'd go from block 2 to their block 3 class, and then they would attend lunch afterwards. And then after lunch, they would move on to block 4. Again, the times will be a little bit different from the middle school, but the structure is essentially going to be the same.
Mr. Modi, there's a few questions about lunch here, so I'm just going to read them off to you.
Yep. I just looked over and
yep.
Yeah. So I'm just looking through there. Yes, there will be. MST should be able to work. It's just part of the rotation in the cycle, so that should that should work as it normally does. It should just fall into that cycle. Let's see. Yes, there will be hot lunches. When students are done eating, they put their masks on and go and talk to their friends. As long as they're staying 6 feet apart, I don't see that necessarily being an issue. We are going to designate areas where they can sit. So we're probably going to recommend that kids try and stay relatively close to one another, but we're going to be maxed out on space. So we're going to ask that, kids mask up and try and maintain those distances as they get through lunch. We are going to allow students to be outside, seniors in particular, during lunches. Mr. Greep's actually looking at maybe seeing if we can't get some tents to try and prolong how long that we can do that. Again, just staying 6 feet apart is going to be really, really important with that. Students won't be able to eat in their cars because cars are located in the front of the building, which is diagonally opposite from where the cafeteria is, and we don't want kids walking through the building with food. So we're going to maintain that outside, but they will be able to go outside. And I think,
Modi, one last question about lunch is if students are home for the remote day, can they still get their lunch?
That's a good question. You know what, to be honest with you, that we've talked about that quite a bit, and off the top of my head, I'm going to check, and I will, whoever it is, whoever's wondering about that, nope, never take that back. I'll release an FAQ, and I'll put that in there, so anyone who's curious will be able to see that. So let me check for clarification, and I will make sure I get that information out to you. Just let me write it down so I don't forget. All right, Mrs. Covey, anything else that I'm missing from our list of questions?
Are there assigned seats for lunch or
No,
classes?
There won't be assigned seats for lunch. There'll be just areas where seats are open, like the auditorium I'll use as an example. Seats that students can't sit in will be taped in the upright position. So students just have to sit in a chair that isn't taped. So, but I'm not going to, row 1, seat 1. I'm sorry, you have a name that starts with A. This is where you sit. So students should be able to at least, if they want, like they do in the cafeteria on regular, is sit in the general proximity with their friends to the best we can possibly have happen. I understand the need for socialization and how tough this is going to be. It's just going to be a balancing act between providing those opportunities for kids, but also making sure that they manageably stay at safe distances, and so we can keep our ducks in a row with the Department of Health, and also try and give them opportunities to actually feel like they're part of a school again. And I know that's going to be tricky, and some of it is things, I'll be honest with you, we're just going to have to work on as a school and figure out as we go along, because I'm sure there's parts of this that as things pop up, we're going to have to respond to, and we're probably going to have to adjust things as we go, and we will. So just looking through.
Question about passing time because of the unidirectional hallways. Will there be additional passing time?
Yeah, the block schedule allows for additional passing time. And I'll be honest with you, if it shakes out that what we have for passing time isn't quite great enough, we can adjust that on the fly. We're not, there's no mandate that we can only have this number of minutes. So we'll see how it goes. And for some students, it may be simple as their particular rotation, because they're going from music class to science. They might just have a difficult time. So we're just going to be flexible. Teachers are going to understand that if they're making the long walk with unidirectional hallways, if they show up a minute late to class, and they're doing their best, I'm not in the mindset where we're going to jump on kids because they're doing their best to follow the hallways as we go. But that's a perfect example of, we're going to see how this works. We did our best to estimate, and then if we have to adjust, we have to adjust.
Mr. Modi, about the SAT, on the 23rd of September being held at the school, even though it's on a Wednesday, is that?
Yes, that is, yeah, we're going to work with our custodial and maintenance staff to make sure we get those areas priority cleaned on Tuesday after school. And we'll probably, honestly, we're looking at using our gymnasium. So as information comes forward, that will probably be all entering through the Bulldog entrance. And then the sanitation group will work elsewhere in the building. While the SAT is going on, it's usually only about a half day. And once students depart for the day, then they'll come in and re-sanitize that area. So we're still working through some of the mechanisms of that. We wanted to make sure first we could offer it. So the logistics of that, we have a plan. It just, once we have all of our ducks in a row with it, I'll make sure Mrs. Lloyd will be sending that information out so everyone knows how it works. I'm just looking, is there... The September calendar, the one that I shared, I believe the district shared it out. And if you didn't get a copy of it, it should be on the webpage. If not, I can certainly add that to the FAQs and a link for it. But I'm almost positive that was already shared. So if you haven't seen it, check your email. If you don't have an email, check the website. And if not, I'll put it in the FAQs just in case to make sure that we have. But I'm 99% sure we've already shared that one out. All right. And I think that gets through. Okay, I think I handled most of those questions. All right. What does the schedule look like from a student's lens? I just want to run through that. And middle school parents, I have these mostly as high school ones, but honestly, if you see an English 10, you can just supplement in your brain English 7, and it'll essentially work the same way. So just if you do that, that should at least give you an ability to visualize this a little bit. So an example of a senior schedule for an AP student, you can see the rotation, and I'll point out for you here, you can see that this student has AP English Lit and Comp with Mrs. Smith, Block 1A days. That student will also have that class same time on C days, and then her B days are Miss Moss Hicks with Anatomy and Physiology. All right, if you look over on D day, you can see that orchestra meets, once during the rotation. There is, AP students know this already. There is generally not a whole lot of free time for students, but there does look like on B days during Block 2 an opportunity for a lone study hall. Another example of a senior schedule, if you look, this is one where a student is not taking as many classes. Here's an opportunity. I wanted to show this one in particular, and be honest, this one may have actually filled up more than from when it was originally pulled. But this would be an example of a student who would potentially qualify for late arrival on B, C, and D days, and early release on A and C days. For a student to have both late arrival and early release, I really, really want to make sure that they have their ducks in a row academically. That's a lot of time to be out of the building. And it's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on as a school. And honestly, I hope in conjunction with our parents, if you notice a student is having a hard time academically and they have late arrival or early dismissal, that might be something where if it's, they're trying and they're having a hard time, it's not a punishment, but maybe we walk back 1 or 2 of those and get them into a study hall so we can get them some extra help or working with somebody. So those would be places where study halls could go, or an elective, or a student would qualify for early release or late arrival. Let's see. Example of a junior schedule, just so, and you'll see that it's different classes, just so based on what grade you might have a student going in, you could potentially see what one may look like. And these are real ones. So some lucky junior, we have I don't know who it is, but we've stolen your schedule and put it up. So you don't know who you are, but you're getting a preview of what your schedule is like 8 days before the rest of the students are getting it. So if you signed up for those classes in particular, you may know that it is you. Okay, and then looking at a sophomore and freshman schedule, you can see, again, where it says English 10, write in English 9, and that's essentially what that rotation looks like. Some of the
Mr. Modi, one quick thing. Mrs. Lloyd just called me, and she wanted me to just let you know that after the SATs, the students will be dismissed as a group, and they don't have to stay in school all day.
Thank you. I was thinking that I was covering that when I said, we'll clean after they're gone. Yeah. So the SAT and the PSAT both, because it's a virtual day. Once students are done, they're dismissed from the building. There's no other classes to go to, and also because it's a remote virtual day, no other kids have to come to school. That's something that we usually have to deal with. Parents that are of upperclassmen, that we have traditionally sent students, freshman students, on field trips to local colleges. Obviously, we can't do that this year. So one of the nice things about it falling on a Wednesday is that we don't have to manage the other students that would normally be in the building. So students will attend and then they'll go home. So thank you, Mrs. Covey. Thank you, Mrs. Lloyd. So what about BOCES students? The nice thing in the block schedule, the BOCES schedule is essentially a half-day schedule. So it fits right in with us. Students will, if they have AM BOCES programming, they will go to that. They'll be transported back to school. I know parents are probably wondering this too. Can my student just drive straight to BOCES? In a normal year, we don't allow that to happen. I am working with the principal at both SAAC and at Myers. They have the difficult situation where they can't open parking to 31 schools, but they do have some parking. So I am willing to work with individual students and work with either Mr. Donlin at the SAIC Center or Mr. Davis at Myers for students and parents who want to try and have an opportunity to just circumvent busing altogether and drive straight from home to BOCES and then straight from BOCES to school. As long as you make it to BOCES and as long as you make it back to school, that's important. So I'm very happy to say that we've worked that out. BOCES is working on a virtual option for students who want to attend full-on virtual school, but still get their BOCES credits. I know they're still working that, and it's hard because the BOCES experience is usually a hands-on heavy one. It's hard to, weld virtually, for example, but there's just information that's come out in the last day or two saying they are working on trying to make that happen. Can students stay focused for this long? I would say, that might be something that would be a concern to parents. I spent a long time. I spent 12 years teaching in the block schedule. If I stood up and lectured for 81 minutes, the answer is no. And you lecture your own kids. I'm sure, like I lecture my kids. We know the window for attention is relatively small. But if teachers are thoughtful and mindful about how they break up the lesson, move kids around, and have an opportunity to do different types of activities and get them started on work, as long as they give that opportunity and don't just try and lock in and talk at them for 80 minutes, I think you'll be surprised. And I also think when student brains don't have to change gears to a different subject every 40 minutes, their ability to lock in with a subject, I think they are going to calm down tremendously by and large. Do I have to be in class any 2 periods in a row like science? Nope, that is not a thing. You'll just have class on multiple days if that class usually doubled up. Do students lose out on anything? No, we were able, and some things might look a little bit different as we move through it. Like, music looks a little bit different, which is, I'm not going to pretend. How do you do a full ensemble when you can only have half of your ensemble there at any point in time? And it's not like we're if it's the choristers, that I haven't done grouping based on who's an alto and who's a soprano and who's a tenor and who's a bass. It might be Miss Stombeck might have 14 basses and 1 soprano in her one section, and then a mishmash of the other vocal parts in another section. So, some of those things are going to look different. Mrs. Burgess just today was telling me how she's looking at doing mini ensembles and have an opportunity to play small group music, which will be something very different than what she's ever done before. But I think she's excited about, just a different look in a different type of teaching and a different experience for the kids. That's, probably more personalized and hands-on. And I'm a heavy music and art student. We should be able to handle that. Again, it might look a little bit different than what we've normally done, but Ms. Orr and Mr. Belknap have just worked on the schedule and worked on the schedule and worked on the schedule, and have tried everything in their power to make sure, as we make this conversion for health reasons, we're not sacrificing the academic experience any more so than being in a half in school, half virtual model already causes headaches and hurdles to overcome. See, I'm just looking, want to roll through.
Questions about study hall and what that might look like, Mr. Modi?
Yes, study halls. I think we're trying to mindfully have that balance of reducing the amount of passing we have in the hallways, but we just need to be really great about communication. So if a teacher needs, or if a student needs to see a teacher, it can't just be wander around and see if that teacher is available. It's just we're gonna have to have a little planning. So kids are gonna have to talk to their teachers ahead of time and just say, hey, you're free this period. I have a study hall. Is there a chance that we can meet up? Or is it, put in your earbuds and open a Google Meet while you're sitting in your study hall and you meet with that teacher virtually, and that may be, sometimes that may get it done. Other times you might need that 6 foot apart face-to-face to be able to work through a concept in person. So, that's something that's, will they be able to get through an entire year's curriculum with block schedules only being in school twice a week? Well, they're only in school twice a week, but they should be working on their academics 4 times a week for 80 minutes at a pop. There are a lot of schools that use a block schedule, and getting through that material has not historically been a problem. I've seen it at Queensberry, saw it at Burn Hill, saw it at Ballston Spa. Having the virtual piece of it and having the Wednesdays off, it's going to have an impact. There's no doubt about it. But we're not the only ones that are facing this. We saw in the spring when we went fully virtual, that the state education department made changes to the fact we didn't even, hold readings exams. So some of it is going to be reimagining how we approach our curriculum, what we value, what our real post holes are in each course, and making sure we stick to those competencies, those skills, and that content base, right? And then driving forward from there. I honestly think we can do it. I believe in the staff we have here. They are smart, inventive, imaginative, and capable people. And this is all new for them. If there's any way to convert to a block schedule, this is not the way. It's not the way to do it over the summer. But when you have to take steps to keep a community safe, you have to do what you have to do. And I'll be honest, I really believe that they can make this happen. I know there's a lot of them I talk to are excited about it. Of course, it's a little scary and it's going to be a challenge, but I really think we'll be able to make it happen. October should mirror. So it's one of the questions. Will October mirror September's schedule? That is the general game plan. And we're just, because things have been changing so rapidly. I mean, you talk to anybody in education, you've probably seen it yourself. You feel like what you know on Monday is no longer a thing on Wednesday, and then completely backwards from what it was on Friday. So I think we're just trying to move in the realm of balancing, giving you the information we can so you can plan, but not to go so far out that if things change, we have to totally reinvent the wheel. So the plan is that rotation. If we stay in hybrid and nothing massive changes in terms of that look, those will essentially follow. That's the pace that will follow. But I think we also have the ability then to stop and take stock in how things are working and make adjustments if we feel that there's a need. So I'm really proud of how responsive we've been, not just as a school, but as a community as a whole. I think by and large, we realize that this is a very difficult situation, right? And there's no great answers. Nothing is going to be perfect, but we are all going to pitch in. Parents are going to pitch in, administrators, support staff, teachers, our custodial staff, our maintenance, everybody is just going to go all hands on deck and just do our best every single day to overcome whatever hurdles present themselves. That is a good question about middle school office hours. I will make sure I get that over to Mr. Ruby, and I'm assuming he is going to have an FAQ of some sort, or if he's, Mr. Ruby, if you're watching, just call Mrs. Covey and give me the answer to that, and then I'll have her say it out loud. So any questions that are coming in from regarding middle school, if I didn't answer them or didn't answer them to your satisfaction, I will make sure Mr. Ruby and Mr. Hammond have them all, and that people get their answers, because I know that the questions are plenty, and you'll probably wake up tomorrow morning with even more. So, we'll do our best to keep answering them the best that we can.
Mr. Modi, Mr. Hammond just texted me back, and he said that there will be an email coming later this week from the middle school regarding tour dates and sign up information. So please look out for that. Okay. Thank you very much. Will we continue with block scheduling when we're back to normal 100%? If that happens this year, we're going to stay with block scheduling. Changing a school schedule in the middle of the year it's honestly, it's more of a headache than it's worth. So we're locked into the block schedule. We will follow it for at least 2020, 2021, no matter what happens in terms of us being hybrid or fully virtual or 100% in person. I have my fingers crossed. The reason I got into education was to see kids and work with them and spend time. Not to do it through a computer screen and not to spend all my time in my office talking to a webcam. So I'm honestly, I'm eager. I'm just excited we get some kids back in the building in a couple of weeks, because I'm just jonesing for that type of interaction. So, but that's one thing, we're not going to change midstream with the school schedule and go back. We will ride this one out for at least this year. Okay. Let's see, a middle school question for office hours. Yeah, teachers will communicate in their pivot plan in terms of what their availability is. So in terms of their office hours, students will be presented with a pivot plan right when school opens, in potential anticipation that we might go virtual. But that will define for each kid and each parent what hybrid learning will look like and how contact works, and then what virtual learning will look like for that class and how contact will work. So if when you get that information, that piece is missing, I just recommend that you reach out to the individual teacher, just so you know how office hours or how communication works ahead of time. So we're not trying to put it together while we're also making that pivot and transition. How will school community be informed in the event of a
positive test for COVID, that will come from district office, and they will communicate that out to all families. I assume, speaking for Mrs. Lester and Ms. Orr, which I probably should never do, but school messenger is a way that we communicate. We also use the website. If for whatever reason you are not on school messenger, if you're a high school parent and you did not get an email from me yesterday, that is an indicator that you are not on school messenger. So I need you to do one of two things. I need you to actually, maybe even both. Check your spam to make sure that you didn't accidentally spam me. And I know none of you would ever do it on purpose. Or just log into School Tool and make sure your email is the email that you want. It's spelled correctly. In the spring with graduation, I had one parent who didn't realize that they had signed up with a Hotmail account they hadn't used in 3 years, and another one who just mistyped their email by one letter. So just check that, and being connected to School Messenger is the easiest way and the most sure way to make sure you get all of the communication that we put out, including emergency information.
Mr. Modi, and I'm going to jump in one more thing about School Tool. While we have all 6 through 12, we have 6 through 12 parents here. If you don't already have a School Tool account, please go onto our district website and follow the link to sign up for an account. This will give you information about your students' grades and assignments and things like that, and other communications that might come that way with regard to their academics. You'll be able to see their schedules when it is posted on the 28th as well.
Okay. So that runs through, I think, all the questions that we have on the Google form. But I will go back through and look, and if I accidentally missed one, I will make sure we get it out in FAQ. And that runs through our presentation for this evening. So I wanted to express my gratitude to, honestly, to Mrs. Stellato, Ms. Scotty, Mr. Belknap, Mr. Greep, for helping me put all this together so we could present to you this evening. I'm just lucky I just get to be the smiling face and the front man. But I also wanted to thank parents and students for tuning in. I know that there's a lot of anxiety wrapped around all of this because there is so much that is unknown. So don't feel bad about reaching out with questions or if you didn't understand something. All right, and you know that we are all crazy busy trying to make this happen, but you are the reason we're here. We're never too busy to return a phone call or to return an email. It may take a little bit, but we want to do our best to answer your questions to your satisfaction as much as we possibly can. All right, so with that.
Mr. Modi, one question, I think this is an important one.
Yep.
Wednesday, can you clarify when the kids are in school Wednesday? What are they doing? Yep. Are students off?
No, students are not off on Wednesdays. Students follow whatever their schedule is. So the first Wednesday is an A day. So whatever a student has A day block 1 at 7:50, they are tuned into that class with whatever the teacher has on Google Classroom or has shared out via email saying this is what they are working on. And at 9:15 when block 2 hits, students are engaged in that class in block 3 and block 4. I suppose they can sleep if they have a block 2 study hall, they can go back to bed, all right, or if they have late arrival or early release. But whatever time their class on an A day meets on that first Wednesday, that is what they should be doing. It is not an off day on virtual Wednesdays. Okay, and then that just, if you follow the calendar, the next one will be a C day, same thing. Okay, so that's a very good question to ask. Okay, and I think that does it. All right. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate your time, and I hope this was of value to you. So thank you.